Chapter 7, Stealth Ship Shadowstar. En route to Jupiter system. Alice had been shadowing the mercenary command ship for a couple of weeks. Today, hunger gnawed at her like an old ghost, even though the storeroom was full and the rations untouched. It wasn't scarcity that hollowed her out. It was something deeper. Hunger, after all, didn't always wait for permission from the body. She locked in the autopilot to keep tailing the Merc's cruiser at a safe distance, 20 kilometers in closing, and floated aft, toward the galley. The Shadowstar wasn't cramped like most solo vessels. At 40 square meters interior, it had room to move. Fridge, sonic shower, head, even a sad little treadmill for when guilt or boredom kicked in. She popped the fridge seal. Cool mist hissed out. Inside, slabs of vat-grown protein labeled as chicken, beef, and something the machine optimistically called Atlantic salmon. Cryo yogurt tubes sat beside engineered berries in vacuum-packed trays. Enough variety to avoid madness, but not enough to enjoy the trip. She grabbed a yogurt and closed the door, then hesitated. 2 drawers down from the food stores, her hand brushed against something she hadn't noticed in weeks. A set of recessed handles, marked with faded yellow stenciling and dark grease smears, like fingerprints left by someone who hadn't expected to be found. She popped one open and found light drones, neatly stacked in foam compartments, 4 sets, each one the size of a carry-on bag, labeled and folded like they'd been shipped yesterday. Surface defense, hull repair, terrain scouts, and, her eyes paused, hacking drones. Her brain caught up with her hunger. She slurped the yogurt down in 3 gulps, set the wrapper floating, and hauled out a hacking unit. She left it near the airlock and drifted back to the cockpit. She adjusted the ship's flight profile, narrowed the pursuit vector. 20 kilometers became 10, then 1. The Shadowstar followed its prey in silence, a shadow tightening its grip. She sealed her helmet, double-checked her mag boots, and returned to the drone. The controller was a rugged slab with worn grips and a cracked corner. She jacked it into her suit, opened the airlock, and pushed the drone out with a firm 2-handed shove. It caught inertia cleanly, no spin. Within seconds, the little bastard latched onto the underside of the mercenary ship's hull like it had been built for the job. Alice settled into her couch, tapped through the drone's telemetry. Network nodes lit up one by one, messy, unencrypted, amateur even by pirate standards. 30 minutes later, she was tuned in. Mercenary voices crackled in her ear mid-conversation. Jokes about engine wear, heat cycles, something about Unit 7's hygiene. Alice smiled. It wasn't much, but it was more than nothing, and more than enough to make trouble. The unknown vessel that had latched onto the freighter Zeus found a disappointing catch. A cargo hold full of titanium plates wasn't exactly the jackpot of the century. Just slabs of heavy construction material, no flashy loot. So, after a brief moment of grumbling in their airlocked disappointment, the mercenaries, or whoever they were, decided not to push their luck with Earth defense patrols. They turned tail, heading back to the outer colonies, empty-handed. Little did they know the prize that could cover their expenses had been tailing them for weeks. Lieutenant Alice was following them all the way to Jupiter system, and she wasn't in it for the scrap metal. Through her hacking drone's tapped feed, Alice listened to the mercenary voices bleed through the static, unfiltered, unaware, and entirely hers. Inside the mercenary ship, the grumbling had started early.
Think we're getting paid this time?
One mercenary muttered, pacing the cramped quarters.
We're heading back empty-handed, after all.
The second merc, more laid back, shrugged.
Logan said he wanted that freighter checked out. We did what he asked. He didn't mention anything about the cargo having wings and a pilot along for the ride.
The first merc rolled his eyes.
Yeah, but we used to do real jobs, man. Cargo full of medical supplies, high-value stuff that sells like hotcakes on the black market. Now, I heard the captain of another ship from our fleet kidnapped some scientist chick, and now we haul some kind of junk. Maybe it's time we find a better gig.
Don't sweat it. Logan pays for doing what he says, not for what's in the haul. Guy's richer than God. He'll cover us. Well, we are less than a week away from Amalthea now. Trust me, we're getting paid.
Alice heard, enough. This ship was indeed from the mercenary base that snatched Dr. Lana Skye, and all that remained was to follow it, to whatever dead place or hidden vault it called home, because ships like this one almost never stop moving. Amalthea Research Station. The station ran like clockwork. That was both its strength and its flaw. Lana had spent the last week mapping not only the alien glyphs, but the habits of our captors as well. Guard rotations, lunch breaks, smoke routines, who got lazy, who got bored, who stared too long at her legs and didn't notice the security feed flickering. The artificial lights dimmed to blue along the upper levels. Station night. The hum of machinery dulled, replaced by the low pulse of thermal regulators and the distant hiss of ammonia pumps. Lana Skye moved through the corridor with calm precision, her hands behind her back, her gaze forward. Beside her, Ben and Tom, the night shift guards, trailed lazily. Younger than Rick and Dan, that were her usual. Less experienced. These two were less attentive. That had been the point. Lana had spent days watching their rhythms. Who took longer smoke breaks? Who checked their pads too often? Who thought of her as a liability? Who thought of her as harmless? Ben had a habit. He'd duck into Corridor C9 near the engine junction to tap his own private comm terminal, probably messaging someone off station. Tom? He followed him. Every time. Tonight, she timed her walk perfectly. As they rounded the corner past the processing tanks, she brushed her sleeve against the emergency sprinkler panel, set off a tiny pressure spike. Nothing serious. Nothing that would trigger a full alarm. Just enough to trip the environmental monitor in Corridor D3, exactly where they'd been scheduled to pass. Tom, leaning in, brow furrowed.
You hear that?
Ben, grunting, tapping the screen with a knuckle.
Yeah, probably another calibration glitch. Hold up, let me check the monitor.
They both stopped, turned back, Ben muttering something under his breath, Tom squinting down the corridor with mild suspicion. Lana didn't. She slipped into a side hatch marked Machinery Access, Authorized Crew Only. Quiet, quick, no alarms. Tom gave a low chuff, half amusement, half fatigue. Ben shook his head, already bored, and went back to thumbing through the control interface. Inside, the corridor narrowed into silence. She moved fast but controlled, ducking through low beams, stepping over power conduits. Her fingers brushed the edge of the bulkhead for balance. She'd memorized the layout. There, on the right, Dock 3C Auxiliary Cargo Bay, 2 rows of cargo containers, mostly outbound, labeled, stamped, cleared. A crate half her height sat to the side, empty but foam-lined and sealed, ready for loading. She opened the lid. Slid in, curled her knees to her chest, pulled the lid down, used her bootlace to loop the latch shut from the inside. Inside the crate, darkness closed around her like water. She could feel her own breath loud in her ears, her pulse thudding against the inside of her skull. For a second, just a second, she let herself believe this might work. She imagined the freighter launching, drifting away from Amalthea toward anywhere. She smiled, just barely. Then, voices. Footsteps. Faint at first, then louder. Rick gruff, a little annoyed.
Ben said she vanished near the junction. Tom confirmed it. Check cargo, maybe she...
Dan grunting, suspicious.
Hold up. This crate's been sealed wrong.
A rustle of shifting metal, a sharp clack as the latch gave way. Light. The lid swung open with a metallic groan. Above her, Rick peered in with a raised brow, and Dan leaned slightly, lips pursed in half admiration. Behind them, Logan Severance, arms folded, face unreadable, a statue carved from judgment and silence. Lana winced against the glare, shielding her eyes with one hand, her heart thudding like a pressure valve about to burst. Rick smirked, the corner of his mouth twitching with amusement. Dan shook his head, almost impressed, like he'd just watched a trick he didn't know she knew. Rick, dry, satisfied, found her. Logan.
Of course you did.
Logan stepped forward, peering down into the crate like a disappointed father surveying a broken toy, Logan chuckling.
Dr. Skye, you should really see yourself right now. You look like a contraband kitten in a shipping crate. Adorable. Idiotic, but adorable.
Lana doesn't respond right away. She just blinks against the bright light above, breath trembling. Her pride bleeds silently into the floor.
If I stayed silent, if I did nothing, that would have been worse.
You wouldn't have gotten far. That freighter's headed for my own depot on Callisto. Military secured. Triple-check manifests. You'd have popped out on a slab next to vacuum-sealed rations and weapons-grade regret.
Maybe. But I'd rather gamble on the unknown than rot here, cataloging ghosts under someone else's leash.
Logan rotating his jaw half-smile.
We're not torturing you, Dr. Sky. You're fed, sheltered. You've even got sunlight simulations in your quarters. You roam half the moon.
And I still feel like a prisoner. I take the smog of Ceres over this cage with rock walls.
Logan's amusement fades. Something colder settles in. He turns to two other guards standing awkwardly at the far end, the ones who are supposed to be watching her.
Rick, Dan, guns.
Rick and Dan don't question it. They draw without ceremony.
Wait, what are you doing?
Logan, firm.
Maintaining discipline. They lost a Class A asset. Can't have that.
Two muffled pops. The guards drop. No time to scream, no time to beg. Lana flinches. Her breath catches. Logan looks at her, calm and steady.
Don't try this again, Dr. Sky. This isn't personal. This is procedure. You're too valuable to throw away, but I will make examples when I have to. Rick, Dan, take the good doctor to the canteen. It's lunchtime after all. Can't do good science on an empty stomach.
Rick and Dan nod. Lana climbs out of the crate, face pale, legs stiff. She doesn't speak, doesn't resist. She just walks. But in her eyes, the kind of fury that burns quietly, the kind that waits. The silence after the gunshots rang louder than the shots themselves. The bodies of Ben and Tom collapsed with mechanical finality, like puppets whose strings had been abruptly severed. No one spoke. No one looked at her. Rick and Dan simply turned, weapon still in hand, and gestured for her to move. She did. They walked her through a series of pressure-sealed corridors and decontamination hatches, the air cycling in slow, deliberate breaths, as though the station itself disapproved. By the time they reached the canteen, the overhead fluorescents buzzed like insects. A few crew lingered at distant tables, heads low, pretending not to notice. The scent of processed broth and burnt protein clung to the recycled air. Rick and Dan remained flanking her, more relaxed now, but still watchful. She sat where they told her, but something in her had already begun to shift. There was no sense in running. Not now. Not like this. If she wanted space, freedom, she'd have to carve it out, socially, subtly. She studied their faces, the lines of exhaustion, the flickers of doubt. She leaned forward just slightly, lifted her tray, and decided to speak.
So, what was it like after the Jovian colonies declared independence?
Lana, poking the synthetic roast with a fork.
Rough. Imports dried up. No more meds from Mars, no more fish from Martian farms. For a while, even coffee was freeze-dried history.
Rick, with a tired smile beneath cybernetic eyes.
But there was work, wasn't it?
Always. Logan's factories ran day and night. Chips, drones, ships, polymer tanks. Once we stopped exporting to Earth Coalition, we started producing for ourselves, and what we lacked, we'd get off black markets.
Meds, antiques, real meat became currency. You either produced something or stole it.
And Logan?
Commerce was his only creed. If it could be packaged, priced, and passed across a trembling hand, he sold it. No questions asked, no loyalties owed.
And nature? You still remember that word?
Garden domes, yeah. Every habitat has a few. Gotta feed a billion mouths somehow.
My grandfather's got a place on Ganymede now. Glass orchards, massive ponds. Man thinks he's a royalty.
Lana, tilting her head, voice cool but curious.
Tell me something. Have you always sold your trigger fingers to the highest bidder?
Mercenary, grins, not without a trace of irony.
Not always. But Logan's contracts? Fastest way I found to turn blood into currency. Doesn't buy peace of mind, but it buys everything else.
Did any of you know Logan? Know what he was like before his wife died?
There was a pause, long enough to let silence do the talking. Then someone spoke, not quite meeting anyone's eyes.
He used to laugh. Not often, but when he did, it meant something. After she was gone, he folded all that up, tucked it, somewhere no one could reach, became married to the numbers, to the contracts, cold but not cruel, not exactly, just efficient. Some say he lost his soul in the ledger books. Others say he traded it for Nova Concordia's survival. Either way, he built something that didn't die with her. Maybe that's all legacy really is.
Lana stirred her synth coffee, watching the spirals fade. A part of her still dreamed in color. Green hills, blue skies. But on Amalthea, even dreams needed clearance.
Athena's quarters. Rain's eclipse. Proximity, level 4, section C. Adjacent to primary fusion cluster. Nodes 1 through 4.
Of all the compartments aboard Rain's Eclipse, Athena had selected one that most of the crew considered undesirable, even reckless. The bulkhead hummed perpetually, a byproduct of the nearby fusion reactors cycling at a nominal 22% output. The shielding was perfectly within tolerances. Rain's designers had made certain of that. But there remained a tangible pressure in the air, like living beside a sleeping giant that might, at any moment, stir. She had her reasons. To Athena, close proximity to the ship's power core was not discomfort. It was access. In the event of containment failure, sabotage, or hostile boarding, she would be steps away from the ship's most critical systems. There were redundancies, of course, but Athena had never relied on systems when flesh, bone, and intent could act faster. Tactical Officer's Private Log.
Clearance level Gamma, eyes only. Rain's Eclipse operational node. Entry 0029-A. Subject, Command Assessment, Torridon. Director Darkmoor's decision to appoint Captain John Torridon as mission lead remains a point of contention within my analysis protocols. His record is adequate, serviceable in conventional operations. But this is not a conventional operation. A vessel with the signature mass and sensor cross-section of Rain's Eclipse infiltrating Nova Concordia territory carries with it inherent risk. Burdening that risk with a commander emotionally entangled in the mission's outcome is tactically unsound. Torridon's motivations are personal, perhaps dangerously so. By contrast, First Officer Coniston is strategically pliable. His decision-making is rooted in habit and protocol, attributes which, if necessary, can be steered. In scenarios requiring moral compromise or suppression of empathy, he would not pose the same complication Torridon might. Instruction from Omega Doctrine is explicit: never rely solely on first impressions. I remain in observation mode. Torridon's reactions to unpredictable stimuli will determine whether he is an asset or a liability. I intend to gather sufficient behavioral telemetry within the first 3 encounters. Patterns always emerge. As for the broader mission parameters, this ship, its crew, its records, none of it is to be recovered in the event of compromise. That clause remains unchanged from prior deployments. Should containment protocols fail, I will initiate the erasure sequence. Tactical denial of information to enemy factions is paramount. Rain's Eclipse is a weapon, and weapons are, by nature, expendable. End. Entry.
Alice Aldrin's stealth vessel Shadow Star on approach to Amalthea. The ship that Alice followed led her to the place no one talked about, a small moon near Jupiter. Amalthea, the Whispers called it, a hideout, maybe a fortress. Either way, it was where her answers lay buried. The mercenary command ship slowed as it neared the moon, and Alice trailed behind in the shadows, her stealth systems humming in the silence of space. She barely breathed, keeping her ship just out of range. Amalthea loomed ahead, a reddish, slimmed-down rock, 250 kilometers tall, floating in the eternal black. It looked scarred, marked by time and perhaps things far worse than time. Ice caps glittered faintly in the distant light of the sun, a strange contrast to the lifeless surface. At 5,000 kilometers from the moon, Alice brought her stealth craft to a halt. From here, she watched as the mercenary cruiser glided smoothly toward the surface, disappearing into the shadow of the moon's inner dock. It didn't take long before the results flickered across her screen. 6 weapon platforms, strategically placed around the moon, torpedoes, missiles, anti-fighter flak cannons, an iron shield around their little hideaway, and inside the moon itself, at least 3 cruiser-class vessels, hidden in the belly of that forsaken rock, like beasts waiting to be unleashed. What the hell is this place? She thought, feeling a chill crawl down her spine. This wasn't just a hideout. It was something more. No one positions 6 heavy weapon platforms around a nondescript mercenary outpost without a reason. That kind of deployment speaks to intent. Measured, deliberate, and far too quiet to be random. Once Alice finished her scan of the base, she tapped the console and set a course away from Amalthea, the little moon vanishing behind her as the ship sped forward. Another 200,000 kilometers, and she was deep in the haze of Jupiter's dust rings, the faint particles of rock and debris brushing past the hull like whispers. Then, out of nowhere, a soft ping. A blip on her comms. She froze. That sound. A friendly channel, open and active. After all this time floating in silence, buried in the shadow of Jupiter's forgotten moons, she wasn't alone anymore.